using the rest of the world, especially pitting China against Russia, and in the Obama administration, there's a lot there. It wouldn't take much for something like this to occur. And it's worth noting, if nothing else.
For Americans, is there anything in your mind that we can do to help?
For Americans, we have to practice self-government. If I would say anything, I would say go to the library, go online, and the first thing you should do is read out loud the Declaration of Independence. Tell me if that doesn't make sense today, as it did then. Just replace King George with the Federal Reserve. Tell me if it doesn't make any sense. Start there. Remember who you are. That's the birth certificate, the Declaration of Independence. It's all about remembering who you are and then getting fired up and saying, you know what? Yeah, we've got to do something, because our generation, we cannot drop the ball. We cannot saddle our children and our grandchildren with a horrible socialism that infallibly will move into fascism, corporate fascism. We just simply can't do that. It is unconscionable for us to just do nothing. We have to do something, because future generations will be livid with us if we don't do something. And this is our time to basically set things right. And again, I want to stress, this isn't really so much about the government as it is the program. And the program is running over the entire world. It's just right now, in order to set up a global world government, we're the target. America is in the crosshairs. And, we need to create our own crosshairs and focus them back on them.
You've said that this conflict over Earth is being very well managed by both opposing forces of ETs, the benevolents and the regressives. What do you mean by this?
Well, we don't see any of it. We don't see the open warfare or the clashes that are occurring, simply because it's being so managed that it's out of our sight. Some of it is actually taking place on a higher dimensional frequency that we don't actually see it. But there have been incursions into third density, that we are in fact aware of, which is why there have been recovered crashes, because they've been shot down. So it's being well managed, both sides, so both sides can do what they want to do, and at the same time we're being allowed to move in a specific direction.
Okay, now I got a tough one here. We're not trying to contradict anybody else's belief system here. We're just speaking about the Andromedans. But according to the Andromedans, in our ancient past, Earth was moved by the Pleiadians. How did they do this, and why is this important, and also why is it so controversial?
What is so controversial?
Well, the concept that the Pleiadians are imperfect, that they've made mistakes in the past.
Well, they've all made mistakes. That's called growth. That's called maturity. You don't know the right things until you've done the wrong things. You don't know the path until you've experimented with different logic, different ideas, different philosophies, different methods of implementation of thought and creation and worship. That's what life was created for. That's what physicality was created for, was to experiment, to enrich our lives with experience, and to worship the extraterrestrials as our ancestors did in the very, very ancient past. It would be stupid. It would be the wrong thing to do. And the reason for that is this. Yes, they have incredible technology. Yes, they have enormous wisdom about space, about life, and there's a zillion things they could teach us. But they have gotten there the same way we're getting there, by making mistakes. That doesn't mean they're gods. That doesn't mean you bow down and you worship them. They have made their mistakes, And in many of them, they're still making mistakes. Now, the reason you've asked the question, obviously, is that the A's have been somewhat critical of the mistakes the Pleiadians have made in the past here on Earth. And one of the things that they have said to me was that the reason they're involved now is to help the Pleiadians step up, that they have an obligation to right some wrongs, that the situation that we're in because they did not fulfill a promise after Atlantis to protect Earth. They didn't do it.
The Andromedans say that Earth was moved by the Pleiadians. Why would they do that? Let alone, how could they do that?
Oh, that isn't difficult to do. I mean, it only takes several very large motherships where you form a grid around the Earth, and you can literally use the gravitational field and pull it or move it forward. I mean, that isn't difficult. Solar systems are built today by extraterrestrial races. They can do that. They can, bring moons that are just floating out in space and put them around planets. They can move planets closer, further. They can take an ice planet, move it closer to a star so that the ice melts and now there's water. They can do all kinds of things. This type of engineering, planeteer engineering, I don't know that there's actually a word for it, can be done and has been done. And it's the same here with Earth. There was a point where we were actually too close after a direct hit with another planet, and they were able to move it further away from the sun, which was a good thing. Okay, so this can be done, and that in itself was not necessarily a mistake. Okay, the mistake that many people make is that they think that because these extraterrestrials can come 100 million light years, 140, 230, 600 light years across the galaxy to Earth, that they have to be all-knowing and omnipotent. Absolutely not the case. It's just simply not the case. I mean, look at our own hidden space program. We know it exists, and they have remarkable technology. And they have probably, in all realistic, have tried to leave the solar system and could leave the solar system to travel to other stars. We have the technology, the Montauk information, the star chambers information. We have enormous technology that we've reverse engineered. But it's one thing to have the technology. It's another thing to have spiritual wisdom. And that's where we're really in trouble here, is we don't have the spiritual wisdom to know how to use these tools. And we're like new kids on the block who get that brand new Stingray bike, and the first thing we do is run through the intersection, with it. Cars hitting the brakes and horns blowing and, people screaming, watch out, because we don't know what we're doing, And this is where it creates problems for other races, especially, Rick, especially when you look at the Earth herself and you look at all the issues that are going on Earth that we just simply don't want to resolve. We refuse to resolve. And here we are going to just leave Earth and take that energy. They don't want any part of that. There's no place for that. They've already been through this. They don't want this they don't want this kind of insolence out there. Okay? There's no place for it. And we have a place in the galactic family, but we have to also know that place. And knowing that place takes a tremendous amount of introspection. Really genuinely looking at ourselves. Let's go back to some of the things that were said very early in the contacts. Before the A's actually decided to intervene, there was a great deal of discussion regarding Earth within the Andromedan Council. Now, that is where a lot of planetary systems meet. It isn't run or owned by the A's. It's a location, so they call it that. Okay, it's easy for everybody in that area to meet there. And there were many that were opposed to doing anything to help us. And let's focus on those reasons. They don't respect themselves. They don't respect each other. They don't respect their home planet. What is their value? Now let's look at the Earth. Let's look at ourselves today. Has it changed any? Has it changed any? We have free energy. We have free technology. Okay, we have the technological means to create that. And yet, we're about to fight World War III over oil? You know? So we can drive our cars and our trucks when those engines have been obsolete for 70 years? We know this. This isn't rocket science. This is out there already. Okay? We're looking at a war over water when instead of feeding the military-industrial complex, we could be building desalination plants all over the world so everybody could have water, so they could grow crops. But are we doing it? Hell no. Why would we want to do that? Why would we want to empower people to grow food and take care of themselves? Then we can't control them. This is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about.
So back to the Pleiadians. Let me get a little history on the Pleiadians. Tell me about what Atlantis was and how the Pleiadians were involved in it.
Atlantis was an extraterrestrial colony. There were many races coming and going. It was kind of the analogy that I've been given was like a truck stop. You had planetary systems moving in and out of our galaxy, and this was one of the stops. One, because of its location. Two, because of its minerals, its amazing different type of life forms, and many of those life forms were brought to Earth in full form, just so you know. Which is why we can't find, the evolution in the fossil record. It's because they were brought here in full form. So it was a colony. There were many races coming in. Many of them were human, many of them were not. There were all kinds of experiments going on here. You had human extraterrestrials, the giants, commingling with women of our world, leaving offspring. Many of them became royal lines. Others were hunted down and killed by other races because they were half-breeds. So and if you remember in the early notes, the A said that prejudice was an extraterrestrial perspective. This was something that we had been taught by the extraterrestrial races themselves, which clearly shows, they had some maturing to do. They were going through a growth curve. Hopefully all those races have, but apparently not, because we still have some regressive races that are here doing their thing. Hiding behind us, essentially. It was an extraterrestrial colony, which is why it was so technologically advanced. People were coming and go, races were coming and going, and that all ended in a war, in another war. And from what I understand, it was the Pleiadians who took out Atlantis. So, and that's a whole nother conversation.
You also, I think, expressed that the Andromedans said that those left behind on Earth were supposed to be protected by the Pleiadians?
Yes.
And what happened there?
They left. They didn't stick around. And other races came in. And not only took refuge, but created underground colonies for themselves, and essentially began the very slow process of managing us, controlling us, and at some point they started using us as a natural resource.
Are those the ones that have created the program, as you call it?
They're a very integral part of the program. That is correct.
How has the moon and those other races associated with the moon affected Earth humanity, and what's the history there?
Oh God, that's no small question. What I've been taught was that the moon showed up somewhere around 11,600 to 12,000 years ago. It was brought here. We know it's hollow. It came from, I believe, Ursa Minor, from a star system called Chauta. And it used to be a craft of some sort. And, you know, in the early years of space travel, many of the planet-faring races now, when they first started, they didn't have all the natural resources to build huge craft. So what they would do is they would use smaller craft, and they would go out and try to capture moons, asteroids, things like that. And then what they would do is they would move them into their orbit safely, and then they would hollow them out and use them as spacecraft. Build the craft on the inside, so now they have all the raw materials they need on the outside. Build the craft, a propulsion system, your life support systems, things like that on the inside of these moons, and then they would use that as the craft. You know, as opposed to using all of your natural resources to build the shell of the ship. They didn't have to do that now, all right? It's just really smart. So, you know, briefly, that's the story of the moon. That's dealt with in Defending Sacred Ground.
Now, the Aryans, the Meldekians, how are they associated with the moon? And who are they?
Well, they're essentially the same. You know, if you look at the Aryan race per se, it's a combination of Orion, of a lot of different races, let me just say that, of different human races. Now, my understanding is that during one of the last pole shifts, they hid underground facilities that were built for them in the Himalayas because it was going to be safe there. And after the pole shift occurred and things began to settle, they came out. But apparently not all of them have come out. There is still a very small group that live inside the mountain, underground, who literally want no part of the surface. So that's how I could address that. And I think this is documented in history books where the Anglo-Saxon race, the white race, you know, came out of the plateaus of the Himalayas in ancient history, and moved down through India and just, you know, migrated to different areas of the world. I also understand that they had some advanced technology that was used as well. They had access to that.
What's their influence been on humanity? Has it been positive, negative? What kind of influence?
I would probably have to say both. I would have to say both. You know, it's, you know, Rick, you could take any piece of information, any philosophical belief, and you know, you could turn it for positive or for negative. You know, but ultimately, the decision to buy into that belief system, whether it's light or it's dark or positive or negative, is us. You know, I mean, there have been a lot of ideas that have just gone by because nobody believed it, didn't want to believe it, and it wasn't of any use. Well, it's the same thing with the religions. You know, it can be used for positive or for negative, but ultimately it's the responsibility of the people who buy into that belief system to use it in a good manner, you know, or a negative manner. So it's like, you know, what was it, Flip Wilson when we were kids? The devil made me do it. You know, I mean, you know, how often have we heard that? Where in fact, you know, he made the choice to do it. You know, so.
Faust.
Yeah, Faust.
So, I know you've told me that in the last 5 years you've had limited contact, although you've had some in the last year with the Andromedans. But according to what you've come to understand in previous years about the moon, what's been occurring there in recent times, say the last 50 years, you've stated that the NSA has been operating bases on the moon since the spring of 1958. Now, a skeptic would say, how is that possible to keep such a secret hidden from the public for so long? And how did you get the information that the NSA has had bases on the moon since the 50s?
Okay. Well, it wasn't their base, but they were there sharing the base. Let's correct that. They were taken up there by the Greys. That's how they got there. There was an exchange of technology and personnel. We know this, but this goes back to 54, and there were even attempts at contacts even earlier than that. So there was in 54 the beginning of sharing of technology. Now that project, from what I understand, it's amazing. The first group and series of groups that went were known as the Black Monks. I don't know if it was Project Black Monk or what. But this has been going on for some time, and everybody thinks the government can't keep a secret. Well, they absolutely can keep secrets. I think in the beginning their intentions were good. I think they honestly wanted to get their hands on this technology. I think they thought that they were clever enough that they could take this technology, use it here, and at some point end the relationship. I think that they were arrogant enough at the time, I'm talking about our people that began this whole program, that they thought that they could trick the Greys out of this technology. We would have it, and at some point we could push them away, and we would have it, and we would be free, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Either that, or they were incredibly naive and just couldn't help themselves. I don't necessarily have that answer. But it has not gone the way they've expected it. And many of them inside the program know that they're in trouble, that this is an issue that they don't know how to resolve. And I can tell you that I know that there has been efforts to reach out to other races to help with this issue. The problem is, though, and what keeps coming back when there has been, how do I put this? When there has been some face-to-face with benevolent races, what comes back is that these benevolent races will push back to the governments or to this group. Well, it was our government that did it at first. They say, look, you signed a treaty. You agreed to all of this knowingly. It's your responsibility. And apparently we were warned, not to go with these guys. So it's kind of a dilemma, actually. And but at this point, the benevolence will intervene. I absolutely believe they will intervene for the sake of humanity and not the sake of world governments. They're going to do, I believe, they're going to do whatever they can to protect the people, not the governments.
Was the 1969 moon landing a fake, or was it real?
I don't believe it was a fake at all, no.
Why haven't we gone back since 1972 or 73 to the moon?
Well, I don't think it was because of lack of interest. I think it had to do with the fact that we were told not to go back.
Who told us that?
I don't even want to get into that. I don't want to get into that. Next question.
All right. Okay. When Mornay shared with you their understanding of the relationship with the isness, which is like what some of us might call the one or God, they call it the isness, back in 1995, What was your reaction to it?
Awe. My reaction to it was awe because of the simplicity and how clean it was. And I immediately saw some parallels between what the Native American and other indigenous people had practiced as far as being a part of nature and appreciating nature and the grandeur of nature and watching nature and understanding the power and the presence of it, not only to heal but to create wisdom and to educate about who we are in our physicality. You know, for example, what most people don't understand is many of our herbal treatments that have been used for thousands and thousands of years, the indigenous people learned from the animals by watching the animals, knowing what plants to eat when they weren't feeling well. You know, I mean, we take it for granted because we think we have, you know, modern medicine, but most of modern medicine is recreating extracts found in the plant world. That's all it is. Except, you know, their stuff is really tweaked, you know, and it creates other problems for the body because it isn't real.
Okay, Alex, critics of contactees often make the argument that the whole ET UFO phenomenon is simply a ruse by attention seekers to create a cult following and pseudo-religion around themselves. Now, how would you answer these types of critics?
Well, you know, it's interesting. The contactees that I've met, none of them really want the attention. In fact, it's more disruptive and harmful to their lives than anything possibly could be. You know, with the exception of the Meyer case, where they create Fiju and you know, it's become radical that Billy's it and he's the one and it's only him and it's only about him. You know, other than that, I'm not aware of well, there is that guy in France, right? The Raelians or something like that, whatever they're called. You know, there is that guy. I think that for the love of the planet, most contactees who have come forward share the information because they believe it will help. It'll help give us some insight into what our issues are and our own self-identity, to realize we're not alone. That, you know, maybe there is a way for us to get some answers so we don't destroy our planet, destroy our ecology. You know, that there are some mentors out there, races who could mentor us through this transition that we're going through. As far as creating religions and cults, well, humanity has always done that. You know, that's why you've got the religions. I mean, you know, the Romans knew what they were doing when they were creating the religions of the East and the West, you know, and creating Christianity. They knew what they were doing. I just, you know, the critics could find anything to bitch about anything. You know, they can, you know, they sit behind their computers and they say they can, you know, say whatever they want to say. But what would they do in the same position if they were being contacted? Would they shit their pants, or would they stand up and what would they do with the information? I'm sorry, you need to go away. I don't want any of this information because I'm afraid I'll create a cult. I mean, what is that? You know, what would they do? What would they do in the situation? You know, it's so easy to criticize somebody else when you're not the one on the firing line. You know, it's always easy to be the armchair quarterback. You know, when you're in your living room, you're not on the floor or on the field having to make the call. It's always easy to second guess. You know, and you know, and you know, from my heart, those people who think they know when they don't know, you know, you deserve to be on the front line. You really do. You do. You deserve to be on the front line. You deserve to be attacked like you've attacked everybody else, so that you know that you don't know what you're talking about. It's that simple. And that's exactly how I feel about it after all these years of taking crap and having crap thrown at me and at my family and at my children. You know, you don't know what you're talking about. And it's gotten so bad that, you know, if you were to ask me, would I ever do this again? Would I ever go public again? The answer is absolutely no. I would keep the information for myself, pass it on to my family, and tell the rest of humanity, forget it, because it isn't worth it. It just isn't worth it. You know, look at your history on how you've handled those who have tried to share wisdom. It isn't a good track record. So, but I wouldn't do it again. If I had to do it over, I wouldn't do it again.
And that's what led to your 5 years where you...
Nearly 6, yes.
Refused contact with the Andromedans?
Yeah.
And what prompted you to begin contact with them again? What made the difference for you? That brought you back?
Well, look at the condition of the world, and I'm a parent. I'm a parent.
So this is about your children?
Yeah. Yeah. Plain and simple.
All right, now come the easy questions.
Don't say that.
Who is humanity?
Who is humanity? Oh, you know, that's an evolving question. Who are we? You know, what is our sum total? You know, we've come from humble beginnings, primarily a slave race, mixed with extraterrestrial genetic races, other genetic races of extraterrestrial origin, or other planetary systems. Been experimented on. Just, you know, that's the $64,000 question. Who are we? I believe that's evolving as we are. What does it look like? You know, what does that look like when we have fully matured? You know, what does humanity look like? And I believe that it will probably be one of the few true representations of the entire galactic family living together as one. That's honestly what I believe. And, you know, through our physical body types, through our skin color, through all of our genetics, you know, remarkable potential. You know, but we're evolving. We're moving closer to that.
You've also mentioned that some of us are from a higher frequency, a higher dimension. You've talked about the Patal.
I was told that in the Andromedan perspective, and this information was given to them by more advanced races than their own, in a harmonic or frequency density higher than theirs, that there is speculation that many of the souls on the planet come from a group soul called the Patal, and that group soul were also known in history, in antiquity, galactic antiquity, as the founders, who had moved through all the dimensions, through the different physicalities, and evolved spiritually to get, I guess, to the highest level. And some have decided to leave eternity and fall back into the concept of time, which is where we are today, where allegedly they are today, let me put it that way, here to help uplift and change, you know, this harmonic, what we know as third density, and to move it forward. And as we move forward, it creates a graduational type of procession of uplifting of frequencies for the others as well. It's an evolution, and allegedly that's what they think. You know, that's a very interesting subject, and you know, I know we're limited on time on the tape, but you know, I've dealt with some of that already in the earlier talks.
Let me ask you, some people would say that, you know, we're here because we've made mistakes in the past and we're kind of like spiritual renegades and this is our prison or this is our cell. we're relegated to this spot in the galaxy on the outer fringes. Other people say we're slow learners, we're spiritual idiots, and we've got a lot to learn before we're allowed into this, heart of the galaxy and mix with the other higher frequency races. What have you learned about those concepts? Are those valid or invalid, or what's your opinion?
Well, I think if Earth is a prison, it's because we believe it's a prison. But it could be that they're all right. I mean, if this is a place where we create our own physicality and we create our own reality, then they're all right. If you believe this is a prison for you, then you're right. It's going to be a prison for you. If you believe this is a paradise and a school and a place for you to learn lessons and evolve and to learn love, then it's going to be a school for you, a university, really. Irregardless, we all know that it's a boot camp for the soul. Earth is not easy. I think the true test of Earth is that, yes, it's physical, but it's kind of like being in a mirror. What you think is immediately mirrored back to you. If you walk around and, whining that you're the victim, you know what? You're right. You're going to be the victim. You will create that reality for yourself. If you walk around projecting prosperity, you will create prosperity. It will come to you. To me, it's like a hall of mirrors. That's what Earth is. And I, for one, feel extremely blessed to be here to learn these incredible lessons and to have these particular opportunities. And I just wish more people looked at it that way, because when you get to that place, it's very self-empowering. And you're willing to step up and do the things that you have to do. I am very thankful for the lessons that Earth has given me. But in hindsight, with all the things that we have to go through to learn to love, to feel, to be responsible, to experience anger and hate and abuse of power and all those lessons that we all go through many lifetimes here, would I add that additional class of dealing with an extraterrestrial race on a planet as paranoid as this? And the answer is no.
Now, earlier you said that you're convinced reincarnation is a reality. In fact, you were even given evidence of reincarnation by the Andromedans. They showed you something when you were young, something about your life history, your past. Can you share a little bit about that? And can you tell me a little bit about how our consciousness chooses what life or body to inhabit? And you've also talked about that Van Allen belt and that it plays a part in reincarnation as well in terms of your understanding of it. Let's talk about reincarnation for a little bit. Tell me what you feel about reincarnation.
When I was a kid, they had put this cap. It was almost like a metallic type of a yarmulke on my head. And immediately monitors came out of a wall out of nowhere, and I started being shown scenes of lifetimes. And this information was coming out of my own head, even though I consciously had no idea or a way to even tap into it. But I knew it was me. I mean, I was emotionally involved with every scene that I saw, and I knew that it was me. And, that's not something that I can explain to people. You either just know or you don't. Well, I knew that was me. And from that moment on, I had a different perspective of life. Because having been born and raised Catholic, as an altar boy, here, what they teach you is that you're given this one life to get it right. And if you don't get it right and you make a mistake, even though He's a loving and forgiving God, He's going to throw you into a fiery abyss for the rest of eternity. That's insanity. It's insanity. I mean, why would anybody believe that? Number one, okay? Number two, obviously that's not a loving and forgiving God. Okay, so in my mind, being a kid, it was a lie. I just knew it was a lie. And reincarnation is not new. Many of the different cultures have talked about it. And in order to mature the soul, you would need more than one lifetime. What do we live on average on this earth? Most people. 45, 50 years for the average. In the United States, it's 72, I think, 73. But outside the country, it's a lot less. And that's it. That's your window. Please. So, everybody has their own perspective on it, and absolutely everyone is entitled to their own perspective on it. I know that reincarnation is a fact, and I'm encouraged by the fact that it is a fact, that we get multiple lifetimes to figure things out, turn it over to learn specific lessons. Now, what does that look like when creating a family to come into? I don't have those answers, Rick. I don't. I did ask the question once, where do souls go when they die? And I was told that if there was a physical place, it would be near the Van Allen belt, where that is. That's what the A's had told me, but that's all the information they ever gave me about it. So, and that's all I know.
Now, in regard to human evolution, you've said that we must make the conscious decision not to spread hate. Why is this so important?
Well, what's hate? It's a lack of love. It's a lack of love. And a lack of love is destructive. It disintegrates things. If you look at some of the earlier notes where the Andromedans have talked about traveling through space throughout our galaxy and discovering cultures who had reached advanced maturity that had actually destroyed themselves because they lost their original intent. And I believe that the original intent is learning to totally and unconditionally not only love oneself, but love all. When you lose focus of that, things just begin to disintegrate perpetually, because you continue to justify creating a space of fear. And do love and fear exist in the same space? No, they don't. They're actually polarities, opposite polarities. So, many of the advanced extraterrestrial races have figured that out.
And so, even if there was an opposing ET regressive race, they would do their best not to hate them.
Yes. Yes.
You've said that in this age that it's so important to know your neighbors. You've said that in your recent meeting with the Andromedans that your faith in friendships was reaffirmed. Why is friendship and why associate with neighbors? Why is it so important, especially now, in these times? And let's end it with this question.
I've been blessed to have an off-world perspective of Earth. And it's a very tiny little planet compared to some of the others that are out there that have life on them. We are a community of people all living together, sharing a very, very small space, okay, on a ball of water and land that is traveling through space. It is such a miracle, such a gift, if you could see it from that perspective. The reaffirming of friendship was, how I had not seen them in a very, very long time. And that initial reconnecting was if we had never been apart. And that when you're, and we've all experienced that here on Earth, where we have had friends who we've never seen or we haven't seen for years and years and years, and then you either accidentally bump into them or something, and it's just like it's like you hadn't been apart. The conversation, the friendship picks up exactly where it left off. Those are gifts. Those are absolute moments of grace. and they should not ever be taken for granted. Because those relationships not only mirror back our own goodness and bring us joy and laughter and sharing, but they help complete us, and reaffirm, our purpose and see good in people every day. And then, that's something I think we need to do, is we need to really focus on looking for the good that's in every day. I read the news every day. I know what's happening in the world, and sometimes it terribly gets me down and frustrated because I don't know what to do to fix the problem. Guys, we try to solve problems, right? We're wired that way. But at the same time, if the kids start laughing about something, it changes my perspective. It brings me joy. It makes me, it brings me back, to what really is important. And I think, what we started off this interview with, what's really important. These are the things that, humanity as a whole really needs to be focusing on. It can't be about money. I'll never forget the time that I did this presentation regarding money to Únete and Fiseas, because they asked me to. And when the whole thing was over, and I spent a great deal of time putting together this presentation. Of course, I was naive because I figured, well, they didn't really know, they didn't understand. But of course they knew. They've been studying us for a long time. And when the whole thing was over, Únete was very grateful. And Fiseas just looked at me and he goes, I don't understand. And I go, well, what is it that you don't understand? And he just looked at me and he said, I don't understand why you have to pay to live on a planet you were born on. And then, it's such a simple question, and it's haunted me ever since. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen? Ask yourself that question. Why do we have to pay to live on a planet we were born on? And who are we actually paying for the privilege of being alive here? Who made them the boss? Who put them in charge? Think about that.
Alex.
And have a rum and coke.
Alex,
I'm kidding.
Thanks so much for spending the time with me today, and with all the people that are going to get to be able to see this. And we all thank you in advance. And we thank you for everything you've done in the past, sharing all your experiences. And a lot of us recognize the pain and sacrifice that you've gone through in sharing this. And we all just want to remind you that we really appreciate it and thank you.
Peace out.
Speaking of which, how is Jasper today?
Jasper's right fine. Anyway, folks, welcome back to WTRK here in Tucson, Arizona. Special thanks for studio catering to Maritza Keefe. We love you. Thanks for coming to the show. Bye.